Thank you. Now, back in Acadia National Park, I remember there was this specific guy, total jerk. He'd walk up to me and be like, "Hey, yo, Trout, got any of your rich and seasoned with McCormick fishy belly?" And I'd be like, "Okay, first of all, that is not how this works, sir. Okay, when we say rolling, you're supposed to hunt me down and then gulp me down in one big bite." And the guy goes, "No. Okay, so first I think I'm supposed to fillet you and then season you and then descale you. Nah, that is not how it works, buddy. Okay, big guy, you gotta know a little something about the ecosystem, yeah? So I'm telling y'all the same story I told him, you take? Alright, Acadia National Park is located on the eastern coast of Maine. Yeah, we're that one lobster state, yada yada. We're a state of marine animals. Temps usually pretty low, nothing compared to your polar ice caps and freezers, but something like 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, there are many marine animals in Maine's ecosystem. Alright. Actually, so I have this friend. His name is Sam. So, Sam, one day I went, "God, why are there so many copies of me?" And Sam, he's very smart, by the way. Sam, he goes, "Yeah, we're part of an energy pyramid where we, the fish people, not to be confused with mermaids, by the way, get the third most energy intake. In an energy pyramid, there are producers and consumers. Producers inhabit the first trophic level of the pyramid, and they get their energy directly from the sun. They kind of absorb it through the chemical reaction photosynthesis. And their energy, being from the sun, they have 100% of the energy. The second level, the primary consumers, eat the plants, or animals, below them, but they get 10% of the energy. The same goes for the secondary consumers, the tertiary consumers, the quaternary consumers, and finally the apex predators. At the end of their lives, their dead matter is given to the decomposers to recycle into nutrients for the producers." So, after Sam's thoughtful explanation, I decided to ask, but then, where does that missing 10% of energy go? The 10% of energy missing from each of the trophic levels escapes by heat and waste. Now, I've never heard of a nuclear poo, but I guess my number 2 does get hot enough sometimes? Now, to answer your question, there are so many copies of you because there is more energy able to be passed around near the bottom of the trophic pyramid. The pyramid actually would have had many more layers, and it is debatable whether some species of animals belong in a certain category, but all you need to know are the basic concepts. The bottom of the pyramid, like seagrass or snails, have many additions because there is more energy. Sharks and orcas are less common, partially due to the little amount of energy they have to spare to reproduce. Anyway, he continues, but that is not the only transfer of substances throughout this ecosystem. And I ask, so they eat each other's poo? Well, that's one way, but we can talk about that another day. In addition to the flow of energy, there's also something called the carbon cycle. Carbon is a very abundant element, which are the basic building blocks of plants, animals, and even humans. So let's start at the most basic need of living creatures, water. Water absorbs carbon from the atmosphere as well as from nutrients of decomposed organisms. From here, the algae takes in carbon dioxide in a chemical reaction called photosynthesis, transferring the carbon from the water to the algae. From here, a common sea snail could eat the algae, transferring the carbon from the algae into the snail. Nutrients from the water also help the snail repair its shell. The snail has 2 paths. It could either decompose and return its carbon back to the water, or it could decompose and return its nutrients to the rocks and sediments to be concealed. Plants could also return carbon to the rocks and sediments, but then rocks and sediments could also return its nutrients back to the ocean or to the atmosphere through carbon emissions like volcanic eruptions. On land, a similar thing happens. Caterpillars could eat the organic matter from plants. Both the caterpillar and the plant will respirate, or digest, their energy, returning carbon to the atmosphere. Again, the plant on land will also go through photosynthesis. Oh, and I forgot to mention, carbon dioxide gas will also escape from the ocean during this cycle. And well, Sam was being a little confusing, so I asked, Hold on. You keep saying the carbon cycle is a cycle, but why isn't the flow of energy a cycle? Simpleton, he said. Just kidding, he didn't say that. Energy cannot return to its original holder. Think of energy as being spent. Wait, but money is spent and I constantly get more of it. Think of it as being spent, but you're never able to get it back in its original form. Like your parents threw away your favorite toy, and even though you can buy other toys that are similar, you will never be able to have that original back. Barbie! The carbon cycle is different in that even when organisms die, they return to a place where they can be repurposed. Okay, all this funny technological stuff, what actually happens in the ecosystem? Well, I mean, what I told you is all true, but if you insist. Everything I told you happens, but of course there's the added interaction between animal species. As you know it, predators and prey have the interaction known as predation, where one animal targets the other in search of food. There are also other forms of interactions too. One of the most common forms of interactions, mutualism, can be seen with the example of a clownfish and an anemone. Mutualism is where both organisms in an interaction benefit. In the case of the clownfish and the anemone, the clownfish receives a home and the anemone gets a source of food, not eating the clownfish, but the microbacteria that sticks on the fish itself. Another example of an interaction is commensalism. From commensalism, one organism benefits while the other is unaffected. The most common example of this is the interaction between a bird and a tree. The bird receives shelter or a stable place to nest, while the tree does not commonly benefit from anything. A third example of an interaction is parasitism. In this interaction, one organism benefits while the other is harmed. In Maine, this could be like a deer and a parasite. The parasite lives on the deer's blood while the deer slowly dies. Why isn't this just predation? I mean, one is killing the other, right? Well, yes, but there's a difference between parasitism and predation. In predation, the predator kills the prey at once, eating all its nutrients at that time. The parasite, instead, clings onto its prey and passively derives nutrients from the prey's blood. Oh, even so, this just doesn't sound real enough, you know? In fact, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me tell you about some of the abiotic factors that help keep Acadia in check. Maine is located along the north coast of America and is usually pretty cool. This leaves Maine and other cooler cities more vulnerable to climate change. The addition of excessive carbon among ecosystems could terraform and destroy habitats. What? What kind of person would do such a thing? Who the heck even has that much carbon? I'll tell you. Humans. The steady increase in carbon throughout the atmosphere is due to humans. Factories, cars, and even some renewable power plants output lots of carbon emissions. This adds to the Earth's warm blanket. Increases in Maine's temperature and carbon-infused air has multiple effects on its ecosystems. First of all, the increase in temperatures could cause an interesting shift in stream flow and the increase in the frequency of droughts. In a simulation done by Maine's government, droughts are projected to frequent annually once every 2 to 3 years. Also, summertime conditions of low stream flow, which are detrimental to native fish such as the Atlantic salmon, are projected to last an additional month, increasing stress on both natural and managed ecosystems. Not only this, but the melting ice caps will also increase the sea level, which will create irregular coastal flooding, excessive erosion, and property damage. Second of all, this change in climate will reduce biodiversity among species. The government predicts that hotter summers and cooler winters will reduce the amount of living spruce and fir trees within their state. This will cause species who rely on these trees to leave in favor of other organisms, like pests or tree-nesting species, which should cause a major shift in the food webs currently mapped. Climate change will also affect marine creatures. Shellfish, like the lobster, might find ideal living conditions in Maine's east coast, but this could also raise the likelihood of diseases such as lobster shell disease and wasting diseases. Third, aside from changing habitats and oceans, global warming will reconfigure the quality of our air. Though Maine has put an effort to reduce the levels of ozone, or smog, in the air, it is predicted that ozone will make a comeback in the near future. This puts people with asthma and respiratory diseases at risk, and also increases the spread of vector-borne diseases spreading in the air. Wait, how do you know all of this?